Aaron Rodgers is a 40-year-old, and I don't think that it's a big deal on its face that he is not at mandatory minicamp. However, I've had a lot of time to sit and think about this, and this, to me, has to have registered as one of the biggest unforced errors in recent memory. And it stinks to be the Jets. I get it. You're playing by a different set of rules where you're constantly having to battle against a prior perception that has nothing to do with you or with anybody there.
And builds on itself.
And builds on itself. But, like, through and through, this had to be, like, there are so many choices that were made to get us to the point where now this is an issue. And I don't really, Aaron can come back and say whatever he wants. I have a feeling that where he is, he probably could have gone another time, I don't know that for sure, but it's one of these things where, what kind of drop passes, like we remember how difficult it was for him to get on the same page with the post Devontae Adams receivers in Green Bay. And what if that happens again? Because we don't know what his relationship is with the Jets guys, So
I will tell you one thing I think that they were fine with, and the other thing that I think that they should have done differently. Which one do you want first?
I want the thing that they were fine with.
I have talked to more people, and I don't mind their logic in not moving the mini camp. And here's the reason why. I don't think there's that big a difference between the OTA practice. For somebody like Aaron, who doesn't need to be in the building 12 hours a day, I think as long as he's out there on the field with his teammates, it's mostly fine. I think so this was explained to me and I think it's a really interesting nuance to it. So some teams do the mini camp the last week of the offseason programs. Other teams do it the second to last week of the offseason program. I guess what ends up happening in a lot of cases is if you move it to the second to last week of the offseason program, you put those OTAs on the last week, and a lot of veterans just leave and just get out of town. And so I think the idea here was Aaron needs this less than those other guys do. Aaron needs the full 9 weeks. Aaron needs the full 9 weeks less than the other 89 guys on the roster do. And so, yes, if we move the mini camp up, then we have Aaron for the mini camp, but then we might lose 30 guys for that last week of the offseason program. Whereas if we just go with it as it is, we'll have Aaron and everybody else through the first 8 weeks of the offseason program. And then the last week we have the full squad mini camp where we have everybody but Aaron. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the math of it, I think, like that part of it, the more I sort of asked around, and this happens across the league, where if you do put that mini camp on the second to last week, you risk losing a lot of the older guys who just look at it like, okay, that's the end of the offseason program. I don't really need these last couple of OTAs. I'm going to get out of town early, right? So that's the part I don't have a problem with. The one thing I think they could have done differently is just managing the perception of it. And I think after last year, maybe people there might be a little bit to the point where they're like, we're going to get killed anyway, so what? You know what I mean? But I still do think like that part of it, I really wish Aaron had just spoke for himself on this. You know what I mean? And people could say like, that doesn't matter. That's just about you and the media. It really isn't just about us and the media. It's really, if a guy in that sort of position does something like that that's going to make news and then isn't there to answer for it, who has to answer? Who has to answer for it? Everyone else. Right? So now you have 24, 25, 26-year-old teammates who have to explain it, who have to talk about it, who have to avoid overstepping their bounds with it. It's just that part of it, I think, I would have liked it if Aaron had come out and explained it. And I don't care where he does it, whether it's at the podium or on McAfee or whatever else. Do it however you want to do it. You know what I mean? But I think like this thing would have been less of a big deal if he personally had gotten out in front of it. And he has a ton of different channels to do that. That way, I think he would have taken the heat off of everybody else in the building.
In hindsight, like I had thought about this more than I should have. But I have a lot of respect for Robert Saleh in particular because he could have very easily gone out there and lied and said, it's an excused absence. This is something, we knew about for a long time, and we didn't talk about it before because we're respecting Aaron's privacy and we ask that you guys do it too. Yeah. Right. Okay. Perfect. Nobody knows, none the wiser. Now, what I'm guessing he was concerned about is the trickle down effect for other players who know where he is and who know that he's maybe possibly just willingly skipping a mandatory practice. And, instead of just pacifying the quarterback in public, you are going out and saying, I think the words were, this is important to him. Right. Yeah. And he said, that this is an unexcused absence. Right. And you can argue that started the snowball rolling downhill. Right. Everybody trying to figure out where he is. Everybody trying to figure out whether it was a valid excuse. All that kind of stuff. And I don't know. Again, I agree with Sauce Gardner, who said, do we really think it's that big of a deal that a 3-time league MVP isn't going to be at 2 practices? No. But I'll tell this story because I think this represents the other side of it. I was recently at a place where I'm working on a story, and I was talking to a wide receiver about his quarterback. And the wide receiver said, I tried to beat him into the facility just to see if I could do it.
Yeah.
Okay? So every day for 2 weeks, I woke up at all hours of the night. And this wide receiver is like, I have a lot of problems sleeping regularly. So I would come in at 3:30 in the morning. I would come in at 4:30 in the morning. I would come in at 3:45 in the morning. Every single time I came into the building, he was there. I couldn't beat him there. His car was the only car in the parking lot. And the player said to me, we had this big win last year, and I looked at my quarterback, borderline tears in my eyes, and I just said, you have no idea how proud I am of you because I know what you put into it. That's what you're giving up. Right. You know what I mean? Like that's what you're giving up if you're
Can I give you a good story that'll back you up there?
Yeah.
So this is about 15 years ago when the Patriots were coming off their undefeated season. And I had Belichick one-on-one for an hour. This is the summer of 2008, right before Brady got hurt. And this was before Brady bought the house out in LA. And this is when, very famously, he was winning the parking spot for the off-season program. There's parking spots they gave to the off-season program winners that were right next to the entrance to the facility. And he won the parking spot every year, right? Mm-hmm. And, I asked Bill, we had talked about Brady and Lawrence Taylor, right? And then, the kind of what it's like to have coached those two. And this is when Brady still, at that point, he was just 30 years old, right? And I said, so then what's it like for you to have your best player be your hardest worker? And he looked at me, he paused, and he said, it's exactly what you're looking for. Mm-hmm. And that was it. Yeah. Nothing else. You know what I mean? And then I think about this story. I remember when Luke Kuechly was playing great, right? Like when Luke Kuechly was, playing about as high a level of linebacker as anybody's ever played. And there were a few years there before he had the concussion issues where he was. And I remember, Sean McDermott was the defensive coordinator there. And McDermott would say the same thing you're saying, which is he's it's unbelievable. I pull into the building. It doesn't matter when his truck is there. Yeah. You know what I mean? So you hear all these stories and, it sounds like, oh, well, this is just a hard, it's not a hardo. It's a guy who really does care. And on top of that, there's an implicit pressure that brings to everybody else. It lifts everybody up. You know what I mean? It's with, going back to Brady, it was I remember Josh McDaniels and Bill O'Brien and talking to those guys about the pressure that they would feel. Adam Gase with Peyton Manning too. The pressure they would feel going into a meeting with those guys because they had to give those guys something they didn't know. Mm-hmm. Something they didn't already know, and how hard it was to get to that point, So these things matter with quarterbacks. These things matter with your best players. So I'm with you on that.
It's hard, right? Because I am one of these people that, I talk about this all the time. I think that there is a martyrdom that's associated with the position that's absolutely ridiculous and out of control. And I think Andrew Luck touched on it a lot when he gave his first post-career comments to ESPN. You have to give all of yourself and you have to expect that. And so I don't mind on its face a player being like, listen, dude, I have this truncated off season. I have this opportunity to do something that's cool for me, that's going to be better for my mental health. And Salah had alluded to that, right?
Yeah.
Do you take your time in the off season to build an advantage for yourself or not? And maybe this is something that Aaron needs in particular. So on one hand, I struggle with this thing because I'm like, good for you. Good for you not caring what anybody else thinks, doing what you want. But on the other hand, there's this part of me that's like, you've always said, I'm not here to be the savior. I'm not here to be the savior, but you act like it, right? And you come in and you say things like all the bull crap that's doesn't have anything to do with winning. We need to cut it out, all that stuff. But most of the bull crap has been, I hate saying bull crap. I don't say that. I say that around
no one
my
actually
kids,
says that. Yeah,
I know. But most of that stuff has been related to Aaron since he's been there, And so it's this weird thing where, like, he wants to have it all both ways, and I just don't think it's possible. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's somebody who, like, you talk about, I don't want to be treated like the savior, but somebody who's taken full advantage of being that. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, because there's that whole thing, like, it's like one of the credos of quarterbacking is, if something goes wrong, it's we, or if something goes wrong, it's me. If something goes right, it's we. Right? Like, so, like, there's sort of that agreement that you have. Like, that's where I think Russell Wilson struggled. Like, I think Russell Wilson really, that's what created problems for him. I would say this in Aaron's defense. The one thing I respect about Aaron that I think is really important, because he's obviously a complicated guy, right? What I really respect is what you hit on, which is, I don't think he cares what anybody thinks. I think he's sensitive about certain things, but just as far as how he's perceived, I'm not sure that he really cares as much about that as most other guys. So I don't think he's busy managing his image the same way other quarterbacks are, and some other great quarterbacks are. And I also, the one thing I've noticed about him, and this really hit me last year and kind of looking at it, he always punches up. He never punches down. Yeah. Right? Like, he never has, like, his teammates, like, are almost always on board with him. His teammates love him. And then you talk to, like, the people he had problems with in Green Bay were, like, the general manager and the team president, right? Like, he's not one of these guys who you'll hear like something horrible happened with, like, a trainer or something. Like, you won't hear that with him, Like, everybody really, the people who are below him really love him. So that part of it I can respect too, is just he is who he is, and when he's got an issue with someone or something, he swings up, not down. So anyway, we could do a whole episode on the psyche of Aaron Rodgers here, which could be in an altered state or something. I don't know.
Now he's really swinging up, right? At the United States government and the deep state, and so to really give that
away.
Really
is. Yeah.
Ultimately, ultimately doing it. I mean, listen, there's nothing, ultimately, this is how it works. And I think he understands it. And it is cool that you don't care, because if you don't care, this doesn't matter. But if you do care, here's how this is going to go. You go out and you win your first 2 or 3 games of the season. You're 3-1, and it doesn't matter, right? If you're 1-3, and remember, that schedule is a bear. If you're 1-3 and the only guy that you're connecting with is Garrett Wilson, and you got a rookie wide receiver that's going to have to take some valuable snaps, and what happens if Mike Williams gets hurt, and Like, remember, guys, this is not a super deep wide receiving core. If all that happens, do we go back to this moment and do we say, could have helped to have an extra 2 or 3 days of practice? I don't know.